Welcome to New England Lacrosse Journal's Chasing the Goal podcast, your source for all things lacrosse. I'm your host, Kyle Devitt. Alongside me, my new sidekick, not even sidekick, my new partner.
I'll take sidekick for now. It's only been a couple weeks. It's always good to be in the studio.
His name's Owen Hart. You want me to let me say your name before you jump in?
It's on that's my jacket. We're good.
Yeah, so is mine, but it's not actually my name. We are still working through the winter, getting into it. Things are cold. It's we're recording this pre-Christmas, so hopefully everyone gets what they want. And if you don't, you can get yourself a lacrosse.com subscription. Boom. You like that?
You're really killing the plugs today.
They said, Kyle, we need more plugs. And I said, I'm your man. Don't worry about it.
You're 2 for 2.
I'm on it. We actually don't. There we go. We actually don't even have any magazines left because we sold them all. They're gone. We have none of last quarter's magazine left.
You taking credit for that yourself?
Absolutely not.
Okay, cool. Didn't think so.
All right, we have a great guest for you guys today. His name is Dave Barton. He is the head coach of Falmouth, Maine, not Mass.
Yep.
Coach, I'm going to share a not so hilarious story of me thinking you were the Falmouth Mass coach up until we sat down. That is on me. I was very overloaded.
I didn't think you were going to say this out loud.
No, it's fine. Listen, I talk about my mistakes. I don't hide, right? Like, we don't hide here. But then I realized it as I was looking at the commit list too, after you told me, and I was like, oh, well, this is the one I wanted to talk to. So that's fine. Everything's going to work out. Everything will be great. No shade on the current Falmouth coach. No. I don't know who you are. You can come later. I promise. We'll put an MASS period after that. But this one is Maine. Coach, it's a long-winded way of introducing you, but thank you for coming on the podcast. How's it going?
Going well. Thanks for having me, guys. In our emails back and forth, I mentioned I'm a big fan, big listener. Kyle, it's definitely not the first time that's happened. We get emails all the time from college coaches. And oddly enough, one of our bigger rivals up here is Yarmouth, which doesn't do anything to help that.
Exactly.
Falmouth, Yarmouth, Mass, Falmouth, Yarmouth, Maine. But yeah, not the first and certainly won't be the last, but happy to be with you nonetheless.
I mean, you're talking to somebody who has the same issue.
Yeah, dude, Hopkinton, New Hampshire, Hopkinton, Mass. We had the Hopkinton Mass coach on, and I got confused. So I can't imagine what it's like for regular people. And I coach at one, he coaches at the other. And are the colors the same for you guys too?
No, thankfully not. We're blue and yellow. I think are they still maroon and white?
Yeah, they're maroon.
Yeah, but it's still like I grew up in Mass, and so I believe they're the Clippers. Is that right?
Yes.
And so we were the Yachtsmen, which certainly didn't help up until a couple of years ago, and we've since changed to the Navigators. But even still an aquatic theme. So I think when we see it all the time, we'll have conversations with out-of-state coaches trying to get games, and I'm sure most of them early on probably think that we're Falmouth Mass.
I had a Mass coach actually text me, hey, what's your contact info? I'm putting together a preseason thing. And I was like, you know which Hopkinton, right? And they were like, yeah, no, definitely. And I was like, do you want both of the Hopkintons just in case? And he's like, actually, yes, I would like both of them. And I was like, ooh, got me. Okay, that's on me. Let's kind of walk through. You said you're a Mass transplant. Let's go through your beginnings as a lacrosse player and how you came to be a coach.
Sure. So I grew up in Hanover, Mass. I think growing up, probably started playing maybe second grade, third grade at the time. I have a brother that's 2 years older. And so, for a couple of years was, following him along to all his games. And then when it came time for me to sign up, for me, like I was a goalie. It's pretty much the only position I ever played. And I think a lot of it was because like the goalie got to bring home the team gear, we had a net in our backyard. And so my brother would always rip on me. And I thought it was the coolest thing having that big pool skimmer. And it was different than everyone else's sticks. But so grew up in Hanover, and then grew up back when, I don't know how many older listeners you have here that would remember the Nestle days. But so my travel experience, I thought the coolest thing playing in the Nestle, like the regional league. I was on Team South. We had like the UNC colors, and then was fortunate enough to play my whole youth through high school recruiting season for, I guess we would call it the Nestle Black team. So shout out to Ken Alice, and my coach was Mike Herring. And so played for the Nestle Black team, from, I don't know, probably fourth grade through high school, and then went to BC High, graduated in 2008, and so played for Kevin Bebo there, and then went and played at the University of Vermont and graduated in 2012.
I find it interesting you said that you were a goalie from the time that you started. In my experience, at least as a JV coach and partially varsity coach, is that we are like really struggling. We need you're a body, you play goalie now. And if just like your coaches didn't have that issue, they had you from age 7 up. I mean, I'm assuming in Hopkins it's the same thing. You just like, oh, you're in the net today, and tomorrow we'll figure it out. And
dude, our goalie the last 2 years was a baseball player until the last 2 years.
Yep.
So
sounds about right.
At least he could see it coming.
Yep. I mean, as a coach, do you find that you can kind of? I mean, that's probably an advantage. I mean, not all. It's not rare, but rare-ish that the head coaches are goalies. Do you find that gives you kind of a leg up sometimes, or even helping out the younger levels? Like I had a kid this year who it was his first time playing goalie, and I could kind of help him out, but I couldn't tell him how to step this way and that way. Like you have that kind of leg up on it. What's your experience with helping the inexperienced goalies in their way through high school?
Sure. Like I like to joke that I think the best coaches are goalies. On our staff here at Falmouth, of our 6 coaches, three of us are goalies. I don't know. I think it's definitely a luxury. I mean, in this climate with, being really difficult to find assistant coaches, being a former goalie, I think definitely helps. I think it maybe frees up some of our assistants to lean into more of their strengths as offensive or defensive or face-off type experts. But oddly enough, in our program, I think our guys would agree. We have an assistant coach, Chris Damback, who I think is originally a New Jersey guy, and then played and coached at Bentley with Murph, and so he does a lot of our goalie stuff. And so I like to work with the offense. I'm not really sure what kind of led me that way, but that's kind of become my baby recently in the last couple of years. But out of season, I definitely still like to stay involved. I'll soak up anything the Gavazdans are putting out right now, to kind of stay in touch with them, and just how the position's being taught now. And I think you guys are seeing it's different than even 5 years ago. So I'm definitely try to stay involved with the position. But it is pretty cool when you look at our program, and I think it's no coincidence we have 3 former goalies on our staff, and if you look at our the goalies in our program, I think we have maybe 4 of the top ones in the state. I think part of it is because of the number of coaches on staff that are familiar with the position.
Yeah, goalie's interesting. I always liked coaching the goalie because I would reverse engineer it as a shooter. And I've told this a couple times on the podcast, but the greatest coaching accomplishment that I have is not winning a championship or getting to a championship or anything like that. It has nothing to do with that. We took a kid who never played any sports. I mean, I'm literally sitting on the grass with him. He's picking grass. I'm like, hey man, what other sports did you play? I'm trying to relate to him because he hated being a goalie. And he's sitting there and he's like, I played chess. And I'm literally like, bro, okay, all right. That year, he was our JV goalie, which is fine. We got into a place where he was stepping. It's all I wanted. Our junior goalie, who's 6'5", he was an all-state player, broke his leg dunking in the gym. All of a sudden, this guy's name's Danny. Danny's our starting goalie, and we're about to enter the playoff run. This is my 2nd year there, and Danny is terrified. We played a team in Division II, which is above us, Merrimack Valley, and they just had this kid who's sniping, he killed him. The kid was in tears and shambles after the game. We won because our offense was I was just like, guys, it was fun and good. Let's go. Stop letting this kid get the ball. And he really I remember one day I'm shooting on him and he's just like, can you do that again? And I was like, what? He's like, hit that corner again. So I was like, okay. And then he got a tip on it. And I was like, oh, we're seeing it now. That's good. And he's like, I've never seen, he turned, he watched the ball go and he turned. Biggest smile I've ever seen on a kid's face in my life. Like that moment, he loved being a goalie, which I will never understand. I'm going to be honest with you. I will never understand loving being a goalie. I used to suit up and play it as like a joke when I coached college, and even at Hopkinton, I've done it a couple times. I probably will never do it again now because I'm too old. But like that moment, and he got us to the quarterfinals that year, or the semifinals of the state championship that year. And I was so happy. Like afterwards, I just hugged him and I was like, dude, I know it's over. He ended up leaving the school, but and I know it's over, but like, I'm so proud of you. You know, like that moment, I'll always remember for like the rest of my life. That is like a seminal moment in just being a coach and being in lacrosse, period. Like it is high up there, man. And I think that's the magic of the goalie position, right? Is that I'll never understand it. I fully admit that. I won't understand you. You're going to get in here and I'm going to shoot as hard as I can and you're going to try and stop it. You're insane. Like, and I think a lot of people say like, well, goalies have to be crazy or whatever. And then you talk to them and they're, you know, you're a personable fellow. I don't think you're not presenting completely unhinged to me right now over the Zoom. Why do you do it? Why did you do it? I really want to know, why did you do it? Why? I know you said you picked it because they got to come home with the equipment and all that stuff, but you stayed with it. You kept doing it. Did you have a moment like that where it all clicked for you?
I'd say oddly enough, I think one of the weird things has nothing to do with like between the whistles, but like I think back, like one of the coolest things, and it's equally, if not more rewarding now as a coach, like after a game when you win and the final horn goes, what does everyone do? They run to the goalie, right?
Yeah.
Like it's this really unique position. I think to answer your question about why I stayed with it, like there's just always like I was really fortunate growing up. Two huge mentors of mine were Kevin O'Brien and Billy Day, and they were right in the area. And so I got to work with them weekly. And so those were two at the time, like in the coaching ranks and the playing ranks, like two of the best keepers in the world are right here on the South Shore of Mass. And so it was, I think just working with those two from a young age and seeing like the minute details of the position, there was just kind of always something to perfect. And then I've got my brother to shoot on me. And, you know, practice, there was always, you know, I was fortunate enough to have great coaching and that like, hey, when I go to practice today, like what I'm working on is making sure I'm not back on my heels, or I'm making sure I'm not making saves with alligator arms here. I'm getting out in front, or I'm trying to limit rebounds or things like that. And so, I mean, that checklist of like things you can be working on, is so long and seemingly never ending. But I think for me, it was just this kind of crazy chase to like keep getting better, you know, and, you know, fortunate enough to play on some great teams growing up, and then, you know, great tournaments, and then you see great shooters at those events and you realize that you got stuff to work on, and it's just kind of this never ending cycle. And so now, you know, to see things come full circle and, you know, have those, you know, guys are still storming the goalie after a win. And I think back now, you know, being on the sideline, and it's a different experience, like when your goalie's on, like what it does for a team, right? And so really frees up your offense. We're not squeezing the stick as tight. We're not afraid to take chances. You know, defensively, we're flying around. We're walking a little bit taller. We're communicating a little bit more, knowing that like we can afford to slip up here because, you know, our goalie's got our back. It's just this cool position. You know, it's unlike any other position in sports. And I think that's kind of what drew me to it and kept me with it.
I don't know if you can relate to this, but I feel like the unspoken thing is you get on the field, you see the team next to you, it's like, oh God, they got 3 goalies. We barely got 1. They must be pretty good. There's kind of indications times of like they field a lot of goalies. They must be a pretty good team if they're goalie competition. I've noticed that whenever I have a goalie come in, that if they're new to the position, they just want to get out of the cage and run. I don't know if that's something that you've had to untrain at certain people. Like I had goalies fill in. They want to run out of the cage, clear the ball themselves.
You don't mean run out of the cage because someone's shooting on them. You mean
no? Once they get the ball on a clear, one-man show, I'm getting out
clarifying for the listeners.
Very, very, very good correction. Just how would you say your play style was as a goalie? And do you also try to maybe not necessarily say to your players, play like me, but see if somebody is a good athletic goalie, I'm going to let them have a little bit more free reign on a clear. I want them to throw it out as opposed to getting it out to the short 60 meters, get them out. Like, I guess I don't make this all a goalie podcast, but just overall, how do you kind of handle all those things? Because it is a crazy position, unlike a lot of others in any sport.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating because I think my experience as like a youth and high school goalie and then that rude awakening into college is something that I try to remind our guys of. So like I remember probably like the most athletic thing I've ever done, had an assist in a game my senior year against Zavarian, like brought it all the way down, little backhand to the back pipe, and like very quickly realized in my 4 years at UVM, I can't recall a single time I brought it past our own restraining line. You just learn really quickly that like you step outside of that crease and those elbows are exposed and those attackmen are going right for them, and you just kind of learn like let's get the ball to the guys that are here at school. I gotta turn my lights on. Hold on one sec.
Yeah, not everybody's Matty Tully, which
I mean, I will say this: most of my penalties in college as an attackman were tomahawk chops on goalies that came out.
That is true. Like
1,000,000%. Like I was just, Coach, I was just saying, I think all my penalties in college were tomahawk chops on the top of the goalie's helmet that dared to come out on a ride. I was like, oh, you want to come out on a ride on me? Okay. That's not, I don't care about your arms, man. I'm going to make sure you never come out again. And I can just ride my defenseman so I don't have to run back all the way to the half line every single time. That's what drove me nuts. That's not the best mentality to put out there. But in college, I was just like, I'm just scoring goals. That's all I cared about, right? And that's kind of the difference. I'm always intrigued by, I've talked, like I said, I've talked to a bunch of coaches that are goalies that, there aren't that many of them, but the ones that are, one of the things they say is that being a goalie too, you can see the whole field when you're playing. And that actually helps you as a coach because you can see across to what your offense is doing and you're directing your defense. Do you think that kind of holds true with that previous point?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's the only position on the field that doesn't have some semblance of like a man-to-man responsibility. Right. And so, I think about our program and it's off like our goalies are some of the smartest players. They may not be the most athletic, but like they're some of the smartest players in our program because you truly have a vantage point of the field that no one else has, right? And so whether it's, you can afford to take a peek off ball, ball's up in the top corner, I can make sure that two slide way on the backside is up on the crease, things like that, where you just kind of have a little bit more freedom, or I suppose some different freedom to scan the field in a way that you can't do when you're guarding the ball, you can't do when you're dodging, things like that. So I think it definitely, it's all kind of connected.
Getting off goalie talk and into Maine talk, you coach in an area that probably that a lot of people don't know about, don't really know a lot of the players, a lot of the teams. Just give your layman's breakdown of Maine lacrosse, who the players are, what the breakdown division-wise is, how the playoffs work, sort of, because I know Mass just had a huge shake-up in how they do their playoffs. New Hampshire, I choose not to learn anything about your state. That's a joke.
Fine.
That's a joke.
That's
didn't mean that. But just tell us a little bit about it, how that whole thing plays out.
Yeah, so we have 3 classes now, Class A, Class B, and Class C. I think the Class C is maybe in its 4th or 5th year. So for a long time, there's just Class A and Class B. And this was kind of stuff when I moved up here. I started coaching in Maine in 2016. And you kind of learn it was a little bit backwards in that some of the better teams, namely Cape Elizabeth, Yarmouth, and Falmouth, were all in Class B at the time. And Class A certainly has great teams, but it's more just based on size of the school. You can petition up. So Cape Elizabeth is one of the smaller high schools in the state, and they're slotted for Class C based on population, and so they petition all the way up to Class A. But the Class C was developed maybe 4 or 5 years ago with an emphasis on like new programs or co-op programs, which I thought was great. Like, the teams that are just starting a program, they now have like a legitimate chance to compete for championships, which is what high school kids want to do. And so with that, you've seen, I think we're approaching 60 teams now, like in the state that play. And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that there is a really competitive Class C schedule out there for a lot of schools. So we have a Class A, Class B, and Class C. For a long time, we had a 12-game in-state schedule, and we've since gotten the support of the MPA. We now have a 14 games in-state schedule, and you're also afforded 5 out-of-state games. So we beefed up our schedule in a big way this year. We're going to be at Bedford and BG, and then we got St. John's Prep, Longmeadow, and Duxbury coming to us. So pretty fun schedule for us.
That's a gauntlet. Oh my God.
Yeah. So what I've found, the last couple of years, there's always been great players. I think about here at Falmouth, I think graduated 2011, 2012, but Charlie Fay, who was the NESCAC Player of the Year at Bates and got drafted by the Boston Cannons, and Cam Bell had a great career as a goalie at Endicott. He was a Falmouth grad. And so for the most part in the early 2010s, there were guys going to NESCAC schools or the Bentleys, the Babsons, those types of schools. And now I think the biggest change, and you can see it, and I think it's well documented with New England Lacrosse Journal, is that we've got quite a few Division I guys, and we still have those NESCAC guys and that top level Division III talent. And now, with a lot of help from the club scene and things like that, we have kids in the state now that are going to Rutgers, that are going to UMass, that are going to Lafayette. And so I think that's been the big difference in the last, 2 to 3 years.
COA Davis committed to Lafayette, a New England Lacrosse Journal. Plug.
Yeah, you wrote that.
I did, yeah.
Nice. Well, I know the Garrett boys because they are on the same Tomahawks team as a couple of my players. So I knew who they were. And I remember watching them I went to a practice and I was like, what's the school? Because I know what all the helmets are. I don't know if you do this. I memorized what everyone's helmet is and colors. And I'm like, What is the blue helmet with is that what is that? A shipman's steering wheel? I don't know what it's
right
called.
Up there. It's a ship
yeah.
wheel.
What's it called? It's a ship wheel.
Yeah, I guess it'd just be a ship wheel. We're the navigators. That's our mask.
Yeah. You can tell how seaworthy I am. 0% seaworthy. And I watched them and I was like, wow, they're fast and they are aggressive. Is that emblematic, those two players in particular that I've seen, of how you guys play?
Yeah, no, I mean, they're Gio and Joey are kind of the lifeblood of what we do. I took over in 2017 and the Gorettes were in 4th grade at the time. And so we kind of knew we had really successful teams at the high school, but we just kind of had this core group of guys. They're now juniors and seniors for us, that were just wildly successful, whether it was football or skiing and all of these endeavors. They're just really, really athletic and really successful. And we saw it all the way through youth lacrosse and middle school. Most of those guys were on the football team this past fall that won the school's first ever state championship. But yeah, the Gorettes they're just freaks. Nobody works harder than them. They were 0.07 of a second away from breaking the state record for the 4x100 relay. They're just different. They've got a great work ethic, but we're fortunate in the way that we clear. We try to work smarter and not harder, and a lot of times it's just find a twin. Just find one of the twins and let them do what the twins do, and that's a big reason why we clear as effectively as we do. But we really try to lean into them and their speed and understand that it's a lot more tiring to play defense than it is to play offense. And then you throw Gio and Joey out there, and that's a whole nother problem to try to work through.
Hey, it's Bobby Moran, Director of Athletics at Thayer Academy. You know what? Experience matters. And Thayer Academy's professional coaching staff understands how to work with each student athlete to help them succeed. Our coaches and faculty are committed to ensuring both 5th to 12th graders feel known, connected, and prepared. This is Thayer's secret sauce, nurturing each student to reach their full potential. Here, success is truly a team sport. Are you ready for your child to take the next step? See what Thayer has to offer at thayer.org. That's THAYER.org.
Are you serious about playing your sport in college? Do you need a flexible education that allows you to maintain your practice and competition schedules while also preparing you to succeed at the next level? You should check out the University of Nebraska High School. UNHS is accredited and offers more than 100 online courses, including NCAA-approved courses to protect your academic eligibility. Students can earn a UNHS diploma or take a single course for transfer credit. Courses are college prep, self-paced, and available 24/7, 365. Enroll anytime and take up to a year to complete a course. Visit highschool.nebraska.edu today.
You mentioned that program winning its first state championship. You, this past spring, just won state championship in Falmouth after years of losing in the semifinals, losing in the state finals. Just kind of talk about what it was like finally getting over that hump. And was it a culmination of kind of all those close losses in the playoffs and learning from those, just the roster that you had and kind of the team that you fielded? Just what was that season like, and what went into finally getting over that mountain?
Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, we kind of still joke that like we wish we could have kept playing. Just the way that we were executing that last game of the year. I mean, a little bit deceiving, the box score. We'd had 2 1-goal games. We had a 1-goal loss at home against Cape Elizabeth, and then we eked out a 1-goal win at their place. And so to win 18-5 in the state championship, I think it just speaks to this kind of upward trajectory that we were on. And, you know, we talk about some of the out-of-state teams we're playing this year. Like, would have loved to have gone up and really challenged ourselves against some of those incredible teams. The way we were executing at the end of the year, it was awesome. I think in a lot of the outside noise, people referred to us as the baby Navs. We only graduated 4 seniors from last year's team. And so pretty much our entire roster comes back intact this year. But it was... You know, those guys we lost in the state semifinals 2 years ago, and we had 4 losses in the state championship up to that point. And those guys were in middle school for those, and were you know, in the bleachers to see that. And we kind of just went back to work. We said we were doing our work in the dark. People can say what they're going to say about us, and in a very weird way, I think that those losses helped make or shape the program we are today. We're better off for it. We certainly would have loved to win them, but I think for most of those, you could say that the better team won that day. And you know, we've just kept at it. And you know, our youth numbers speak to that. Our middle school participation numbers speak to that, and it's just become a lacrosse town for sure.
I will say, there is no knife to the chest like losing a state championship. It is one of the things that the kids always ask me, did you ever watch the game? I was like, no, I can't watch it. And they're like, I watch it all the time. And like, these are kids that are graduated because it was a wild game. Like it's one of those things where when you lose, you're like, everything's blank because it's over. But you got there, but you didn't win. It is like so disheartening and like weirdly encouraging the second you get back on the field the next season. It is the greatest motivator that has ever existed in anything. Losing a state championship is horrible. But winning one is the complete other side. People think it's like, oh, we had a bad season, we lost, and no. I'm going to tell you something. Losing the state championship is worse than being terrible. It is. In the moment, it is. It isn't in the grand scheme of things. In the moment, nothing hurts worse. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, I mean, there's something special. We talked about this last year. There's something special about getting to the state championship. You've earned the right to know that it's your last practice. Like, we've talked about that a lot the last couple of years. And I think that's what made 2 years ago really weird, in that, you know, we were just beat. We were outplayed and outcoached, and we lost. And it was just like, whoa, we don't get to go to practice. At least when you go to a state championship, you're like, this is it. Like, the hay is in the barn. But yeah, like in those past losses, like I was gutted for our guys that like truly bought in. And you know, were fully invested in what we were doing, and it's a valuable lesson. I don't think anything we're going to say in the aftermath of those games is really going to sink in the moment. But I think what we said to those guys was like, if this is the worst thing that happens to you in your life, you're going to be just fine.
We said the same thing.
And it's a huge deal, and in the moment, and those feelings are real. And we've lived a lot more life than our players have.
Right.
And so that's not to undermine how they're feeling, but it's just, speaking from experience of like, my goodness, you have so many great things ahead of you, and we can be devastated and really, really proud at the same time. But I think about, you mentioned how gutting and devastating it is. 2 years ago when we lost in the state semifinals, I teach fifth grade here in Falmouth. It's at the elementary school, but we're all one campus, and so we lost in the state semifinals at home. And then the next day was the last day of school here in Falmouth, and one of my fifth graders, we were getting ready for dismissal, and he had like a single tear streaming down his face, and he was like, "When I'm in high school, we're gonna win that thing." And I was like, you better believe it, brother. We are. And so it's one of those, like, those kids are seeing it. It's not just the high school kids that feel like they've lost that championship. And I think that, the 2024 state championships started to be won in 2020 and 2021 when these guys were in 7th and 8th grade and sat in those bleachers at Fitzpatrick Stadium and saw our guys on the losing end of it and just decided that wasn't going to be them. And so there's something pretty special about that.
You mentioned this year beefing up your schedule and playing a lot of out-of-state teams. Is that something that you've done in the past? And is also that something that you see of a lot of other Maine schools either having done in the past or starting to do in the future, kind of getting out of Maine and playing some more teams from New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts? Is that a trend that you see on an uptick?
Yeah, it's something we've always done. We have a great relationship with Bedford, and so with Coach Bordeaux moving on to St. A's, we made sure to keep that relationship going. And then obviously there's the Tomahawks connection with Coach Cam. So, we've been trying for the last couple of years to get BG on the schedule. And so those are ones that we've played for the last couple of years. We had played St. John's Prep a couple of years ago down at their place. And truthfully, I reached out to Pinch just seeing if we could come to them again. And he was like, no, in classic Pinch-on fashion, he was like, no, I believe we owe you a visit this year. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. So you guys will come to us. And then Longmeadow, there's just kind of a connection there between someone that played with Coach Campbell. And then being a South Shore guy, my wife is from Duxbury and went to Duxbury High. So that's a team that I've always wanted to play just to, show our guys up here that there's great lacrosse and there's a standard that we're trying to get to. I certainly think that the strength of play in Maine has gotten significantly better. But I just felt like this year, in addition to some of those top teams like Cape Elizabeth, like Thornton Academy, there's great lacrosse out there that our guys need to see, because I think, quite honestly, it exposes weaknesses in your game and things that you need to work at. And, rest assured, those 5 teams are going to show us what we need to work on for sure. So we're looking forward to that.
Absolutely.
What I'm kind of hearing is that Maine is actually in a similar position. I didn't know there were 60 teams that play lacrosse in Maine. I thought it was probably more around 40, but knowing that it's 60 is actually pretty illuminating. I think the next step is probably what happened in New Hampshire, where you're trying to get the play to a level that is super competitive with Mass, and you as a program have been able to do that. But, and I'm not throwing shade here because New Hampshire's the same way, I wouldn't say the whole of Maine is ready to go play BG. That's just not happening, right? So can you talk a little bit about how lacrosse has developed in your time in Maine? And I have a theory of why New Hampshire and Maine, both, and Vermont, all need to get better, and it's one thing. But I want to know kind of what your perspective is on how everything has developed and the development of lacrosse in the state.
Yeah, I mean, 2 things come to mind. I think the face-off game, I think, is a huge one. Like I think if you look at the upward trajectory in our state, right now there's some really good draw men in the state that I think, possession's a huge part of the game. But I would agree. I think that as a state, that's definitely the next step. And And it's a little frustrating in that we start a week after Mass and New Hampshire. And so on the surface, that doesn't seem like a big deal, but it makes scheduling really difficult when Mass and New Hampshire are kind of finishing up preseason and starting to get regular season games in. We're kind of still in evaluation mode and would prefer scrimmages and things like that. So it's made it difficult, but I know that it's pretty common. Yarmouth hosts some New Hampshire teams. Thornton Academy hosts or travels. Scarborough does the same, North Yarmouth Academy. So there are definitely teams that are competing. I think right now it's the Bedfords and the Exeters and the Pinkertons. But yeah, I think BG's kind of the standard. And then when you work down to Mass, I mean, I can't think of a better team than St. John's Prep. And so we just figured we might as well just shoot for the moon here and play the very best teams we can. But yeah, I would say it's the face-off game that might is the separator right now. And also, I think just the depth. Like you think about here in Maine, like, you know, we have great players, but the depth, you know, you think about your second line midfielders, your fourth pole, your short stick on your man down unit, like those are different types of athletes down in Mass at the moment than we have here. And so I think that just from like a depth perspective, I think that might be an area where we up in Maine need to focus, and it'll come with time, but it comes with, you know, in my opinion, playing schedules like we are this year for these guys to see like, all right, like that's the level that we're trying to get to, and you know that's kind of the standard, and we're going to keep working at that.
I think the thing that I was alluding to, that I believe is still true in New Hampshire, it's not so much true in Mass because there's just so many dudes that went to Springfield and just coached lacrosse. Like, what? Why? There's so many of you. So many dudes that played at UMass and they're all on the same team somehow. Like, how are you were all from the same team? That doesn't make any sense. The thing that we need, I don't want to speak for Maine, but I think it's true. New Hampshire and Maine and Vermont need more coaches. Like, quality. I don't like being the guy that's like, you didn't play so you can't coach, because that's not true, right? But having that heritage of lacrosse in your family or even something like that goes such a long way in places where that's not the case, right? Like, I coach a Division III in New Hampshire, which is by size, but also there's different towns that have different, you know, traditions, right? And Hopkinton happens to be a lacrosse tradition built town from the early 2000s. So there's a lot of kids that grow up wanting to play there, going there, not necessarily leaving for private schools. And we've taken advantage of that. But I also coach against people that I know aren't lacrosse people. Like, you're a soccer coach and you have to coach lacrosse because we don't have anyone else. Or and Maine's like this. Maine's like New Hampshire like this too, where not every town is 5 minutes away. You know, you're driving for quite a bit to go play certain teams in New Hampshire and Maine, right? So my question to you is, how do you get those coaches to come, either players that come back or transplanted from other areas of the country, to make that difference for you? Because I really think that's one of the things that makes competitive players is competitive coaches.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a great point. I think one of the biggest aha moments that I had when I moved up here is the lacrosse world is a small world in itself, but up here in Maine, it's really cool. Like, there are some great players. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Lau-Gosney twins that played at Lehigh. Yes. Like, play with them once a week. We call it goon ball. But there's some really strong players. DJ Hessler, who, like, at Tufts, player of the year. We play every week, and there's some really great players that are still involved in the game. But I think it's just tough nowadays. I mean, you know it, Kyle, you live it, and I guess both of you live it. Like, it has to work for your work schedule too, and like to be a high school coach and make it work. It certainly, you know, isn't for everyone as far as practice and game schedules and travel and things like that. But yeah, I think that's a great point. I'm fascinated. This group that we have in Maine right now of players, I'm fascinated to fast forward a couple years after they're done with their great college careers. I would love nothing more then for as many of them as possible to come back in some capacity and give back to the game in Maine. I think that you're seeing that in other states, and it's a huge accelerator of skill. On our staff, I was just talking to someone today about one of the coolest things for us is that we have 4 coaches for our JV and first team, and all 4 of them are guys that played for us here in Falmouth, went to college, and came back to coach. And if we could get that going statewide, I think we're building something pretty special.
You mentioned having people come back. I'm just curious if you have any other types of, whether it's like an alumni game that you guys do, or you tied into your youth practices at all. Like I know, because I forget what coach was talking about, how they assign like one player for like per youth team. I just wanted to like, just what's your overall program like? How does it encapsulate all ages and bringing people back, and also bringing people in? Because I mean, lacrosse needs as many players as we can, as you just alluded to, and just kind of what does that look like at Falmouth?
Yeah, so we have we're all kind of under one umbrella, grades 2 through 6. 2 through 12, as I turn my light back on here. And we have, I think it was 75 players between 2nd and 6th grade. And then our 7th grade team had 19 boys, and our 8th grade team had 22 boys. And so we have been trying to build the youth program for sure. In Maine, we've recently utilized the athlete development model. So like the small-sided games at the youth level, which has been awesome, just to get the games moving and create a little bit of tempo. But in our program, we definitely view it as like grades 2 through 12. Our high school boys are coaching the youth teams on Sundays. In Falmouth on Wednesdays, once or twice a month, are early release school days. And so our high school boys will run a youth clinic on the turf for 2-3 hours every day, which makes it easier for parents to pick their kids up at 3 o'clock rather than noon. We have ball boys at every one of our home games. Youth teams are playing at halftime and things like that. Being in the unique position to teach elementary school, like I'm here in the building, and it's one of the most special parts of the job is like seeing the number of Falmouth Lacrosse t-shirts and sweatshirts that are here in the building seemingly every day. We do a lacrosse unit for K through 5 here in the elementary school as part of the PE program, which is really cool. And so, a lot of those traditions, we understand that even though a kid might be in 2nd or 3rd grade right now, just like that, they're going to be a 9th grader. And so, if we can get in their ear early, we do a lot of training with our youth coaches and our middle school coaches, just trying to use similar terminology whenever possible, but scaled to their age and what's appropriate. It's pretty cool when our 7th and 8th graders come in understanding what a pair's offense is, or, the way that we clear and the roles that we assign to certain guys in the clear, landmarks on the field or stuff like that. So when they're hearing that stuff yelled from the sideline, that light bulb being able to go on, being like, oh, we play a similar game. Like we call things the same things. And so, and our high school guys, they understand like that was them not too long ago. It's just really special. Like we have the banners up during the spring of all the players along the fence to the turf. And when I'm out there at recess with my 5th graders, you'd think it was like the Boston Cannons, right? They're pointing them out and they see them walking around campus, and it's a huge deal. And so I think those things, like making it mean something to play lacrosse in Falmouth, is definitely a responsibility that's not lost on me. And I think it probably plays a fairly big part in our numbers continuing to grow.
There's so much to be said for the community built to the apex, right? It's easier when you win. I'll say that. It's much easier when the high school team wins. I'm not saying it to anyone. Everyone is. It's the most simple thing to pull off, right? But if you can get that sort of not adoration but fandom out of the youth program, to like even my girlfriend's son comes to the games and he is so scared of those kids to talk to them because they're like larger than life to him, because he hears me talk about them all the time and talk about the games and all that stuff. He went with us to the JV tournament one year, and the kids are all like, "Who is this?" They're like, they all think it's my son. He's not my son. I wish he was. He's an amazing kid. But he lives in another town, so he doesn't really live in Hopkinton. But these kids, the way they took him in at this JV tournament, you know, he was hitting the gritty on them, like doing dances and stuff, and they're just like, "This is the coolest kid I've ever met." And like, he's like, "Did you hear that? They said I was cool." And they're, you know, like that kind of stuff makes you want to play lacrosse. Forget like the town's great, but he's not from the town. He just, that acceptance, if you can build that acceptance and that goal for kids to be like, I want to do that someday. Like that's so cool that you're having time with me and I'm like 7 and you're like playing catch with me and like playing songs for me and laughing and joking with me. Like that kind of impact in community builds and builds and builds. And that's how you get a winning team. That's how you build a winning culture, because it comes from the desire to, I want to be part of that. I can't wait to be a part of that. Just like you were saying, it's the exact same thing is, you know, that's the thing that builds lacrosse programs, not teams. I say that every year when we start. I'm like, this is not a team. This is a program. And guys that are freshmen, now you're in the program. You thought about being in it the whole time. You thought you were in as a youth player. You're not. Now you're in the program. And there is a difference. And I think that's the coolest thing about being a coach and coaching younger players. You know this, coaching JV kids, where you're just like, all right, man, stop chasing butterflies for a second. Come over and do some ground ball stuff. You know, that still exists. But then you have another class of kids that like, maybe they're just not big enough to play varsity, or their IQ's not there. Those are the kids that are going to be stars by the time they're seniors. And that's the coolest part about coaching to me, is seeing that develop from, wow, this kid can't even tie his shoes and he just fell over in the stretching line, you know, and now he's starting. You know, it's just the coolest thing about getting to do what we do, getting to do what you do. And I love talking about it. Having a podcast I can talk about it on is insane. I can't believe they let me do this. But, you know, I just love talking to coaches that have that same mentality, right? And that community is what builds your team. It is not anything else. I really don't think it is.
No. I think that one thing when you went on that little soliloquy,
that's what I do.
That came through my head was the player identification. Like we have certain bits of it in Westwood, but just think overall you see it now is just with the rise of social media, people can look up and watch the highlights or whatever on Instagram, YouTube. You see that, and that kind of gets kids a little excited too. I mean, for better and for worse, I think that's maybe getting a little bit too blown out of proportion, but that's also something that like the rise of social media can influence certain kids' ability to track and follow their teams and have that be kind of like the fandom that you see. I'm not sure how prevalent Falmouth is on social media, if at all, but that's just one thing that I've seen, at least in Massachusetts. I don't know.
Yeah, I got to give it a shout out. We got a student here, Pat Bevan, who, you know, he is a senior at Falmouth that's going to Penn State next year. I'd imagine he's going to work with definitely their football team, maybe lacrosse team, and does an awesome job with all the sports, with like hype videos and highlight reels and things like that. So it's definitely an external motivator for sure. You know, we also hang a huge sign in our locker room that says "Ignore the noise." So got to be mindful of that. But you know, it's certainly you know, the way business is being done as far as what motivates kids these days. And so I think there's definitely some value in that.
Let me just touch on one thing before we leave off here. All these great NESCAC teams in Maine, right? They have communities around them. You look at the roster, not a ton of Maine kids on these teams. And I do tend to give crap to the coaches a little bit playfully of like, when are you going to recruit some Maine kids? And then like every year they're like, look, Kyle, we got a Maine kid, you know, like, you know, it's kind of become a running joke with a couple of these guys, but it's not a joke because those kids are earning their way onto a NESCAC team. That's awesome. That's like what we all want, right? Like, I mean, we don't have any NESCAC teams in New Hampshire. 1 tier rolls down. We only have one D1 team.
You got an Ivy.
We have an Ivy. We have an Ivy that everyone hates driving to, but I love driving to because it's a nice, clean drive. Not like leaving here, which I'm going to do in about 10 minutes.
And it's raining. It's going to be even worse.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me. I guess kind of the thrust of that point is basically like, is that what needs to happen for Maine to get better? Is these schools to recruit more locally, or is it just like a domino effect of the first couple will go and then like more kids will come from different places? Because I mean, you know, Cape Elizabeth has this Bryant pipeline, you know, Coulter Olson was going to go Air Force. Now he's going to go Rutgers. Like, is that the key, or is it, I shudder to say this, sorry for saying this, is it more development on the club team side?
I think the first step is like us getting to a level where our guys in state are recruitable, and those teams are doing really well. I mean, you know, as far as Bowdoin's done really well the last couple of years with Coach Basin, and former UVM Coach Bernhardt's is over at Colby now. And so I think like they're doing a really good job of recruiting at the national level. I think it's on us as coaches and players in the state, you know, to put out a product that they believe fits with their play style. You know, we certainly have those guys. And I think that's maybe the first domino to fall, is that, you know, we've seen a lot of interest in the last 2 years in a lot of the names that you mentioned, the Coulters, you know, the Nate Pattersons and the Lathrop boys from Cape Elizabeth that have gone to D1 schools. And now we're seeing it on our team here in Falmouth, that these NESCAC coaches are taking notice of our guys. And so, you know, I think that first domino has fallen, that I think, you know, a lot of it is on the club side for sure, getting them that exposure. But I think we're at a place now where those coaches are starting to see like these guys can play, right? We're pumping out a couple players every single year from this state that are going on to contribute at the next level, whether that be high level D3 or in recent years Division I. And so now, like, we tell our guys in Falmouth all the time, like, if and we've said it with our 25s and 26s, like, if a NESCAC coach calls, like, you pick up the phone and you entertain that call 10 times out of 10. Like, it's not a 4-year degree, it's a 40-year degree. And what those schools can offer you is something that very few schools in this country can offer you. And so those have been really fun, I think, eye-opening conversations for our guys. In the last couple of years, we've taken trips to watch Bowdoin home games. Like, there's nothing better than when Tufts comes up to play at Bowdoin or Middlebury comes to play at Bowdoin, and these guys can see, like, this is high level, this is Division I lacrosse. Like, all of these kids on the field can play at the highest of the high levels. And so that's really cool. And so I think, you know, guys in the state have started to buy in and realize, like, how lucky they are to have 3 prestigious schools, and not to mention, and arguably the best Division III conference in the country right here in our backyard. And so I think it's definitely a contributing factor, and I would love nothing more than to see lots of these high level in-state Maine players staying home to play at the Bateses, the Bowdens, the Colbys. Would be pretty special. But yeah, I think like I said, the first domino has definitely fallen, where coaches are starting to take notice, and we're hearing from NESCAC coaches more, we're seeing them at games more. And so I think that those days are coming, Kyle, where those guys are going to start to be on rosters, and not only be on rosters, but be like contributing players on those teams.
Awesome. Great place to leave off. Coach, thanks so much for joining us. That was great. That was a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And thanks again for listening to New England Lacrosse Journal's Chasing the Goal podcast. For Owen Hart, I'm Kyle Devitt. See you next time.